Hi, and welcome back to the Mind of the Writer. So, if you're following this series, you'll know that right now we are looking at love writing. And in August, I had three fairly formal graphic videos that I did with the help of videographer Matthew Stiletti. And in September, I'm moving back to the more informal me chatting videos as I continue to sort of guide you through the somersaults of my brain as I try and come up with a more detailed theory or philosophy on writing love. So a couple of weeks ago, we looked at using that whole idea of art is imitating life as a mantra to bolster the writing of a love scene. So what would be good off page will probably be good on page. Then we looked at context, but context for the writer. So being able to contextualize explicit writing or romantic writing within the framework of a job as work. And today I'm really doing this with a bit of the wink in the eye because I wanted to compare love writing to cooking. And I hope no one takes offense to that. I actually love to cook. And so for me, cooking is another form of creativity. And I also love to watch cooking shows as well. But I think that we can use cooking as an analogy for creating a good love scene, or at least use use cooking and all the things that go into preparing a good meal. We can use that as a framework for or a blueprint for creating a good love scene. So one of the things I like to do on Netflix is watch shows like Chef's Table, and you see the chefs, and sometimes they're going out into the wilderness to get all of their ingredients, so or maybe they have their kitchen gardens outside and everything's fresh, and then they come back to the kitchen and they're experimenting and they're putting together artistic plates, or sometimes they're not artistic, sometimes it's real good home cooking, and they are experimenting and they're playing around with food to come up with that perfect meal. And I just see writing a love scene as very similar to that, except what are our ingredients? Well, the ingredients are, for me, the first one is language. Because, and I did touch on this on, I believe, when I was looking at, setting as muse and language as muse. Because if you can use good words and, or a variety of words and lots of metaphors and similes, and that are going to bring out beauty in certain actions or in certain parts of the human body. If you can use punctuation, the best punctuation, so lots of dashes and semicolons and periods and spaces, and to bring that scene to life in its rhythm and its breath, well, then your language is your key ingredient. So if you're thinking of bread, language is your flour. But then the other elements, which of course you're going to need you're going to need language in order to convey, but setting and lighting and, well, what else do you need? What are your ingredients for writing a good love scene? Well, it could be a muse. It could be a whole series of muses. It could be a whole, sort of barrel full of inspirational people and little bits and pieces of people that you've sort of collected over time for characters just by osmosis, just by living and being exposed. It could be one of your ingredients is that you have a very beautiful workspace, and you've got a beautiful kitchen. So I think that if you can look at writing a scene like cooking, and then the other thing, and I touched on it at the beginning of this video, is the experimentation. For me, that's huge. because you'll see some of these chefs experimenting with different flavors and with things that wouldn't normally combine. And I know that I do that when I write these sorts of scenes. So I will put two very unlikely characters together, characters that you wouldn't expect would go together. And yet, for some reason, by trying out, different character combinations, well, I mean, they really work together. And I mean, I hate to compare people to food, but it's kind of a little bit like that, that you're experimenting. Or maybe, you're experimenting by putting these characters in a setting which would be very, very unlikely for love. I mean, I don't know, the abandoned cathedral is probably a little bit unlikely, but I think in another earlier video at the beginning of this YouTube channel, I talked about, well, taking scenes and shifting them to unlikely settings. So taking a love scene and putting it in the corner of a battlefield, and really experimenting. So I think that that's another thing in the cooking that goes really well with, the creation of a love scene. And as I develop these thoughts further, I'll probably come up with a whole lot more comparisons between cooking and writing love scenes. But I just thought that that was kind of a delightful, humorous little comparison to bring up in today's video. So we will see you next week on The Mind of the Writer.